and Sunday, and then if you can stay longer, there's also stuff going on Monday. There's origami classes that you can take to learn or how to fold things out from simple, intermediate to complex level origami. There's a world-class exhibit of origami from around the world, and that is unparalleled as far as origami exhibits go. And there's just lots of cool people like me there and stuff. The origami community is really, really friendly. Everyone wants, you invent an origami model, you want to share it with other people. So origami conventions are like happy places where people are like, look what I've learned. I've learned this cool beetle. Yay, let me teach it to you. So yeah, if you like origami and you're willing to do that, Google Origami USA and look for their annual convention. You can register, you can go. I don't even think it's all, no, it's not free. But as conventions go, it's pretty cheap. It's not like thousands of dollars. It's like, people wear origami hats, it's true. There's a lot, origami hat is another genre that's quite popular. Yeah. Oh, in the back there, yes. So the question, if I can restate it, is how, aside from the applications we've talked about and the methods we've talked about, how does this relate to things like protein folding, and in particular how the mountains and valleys interact? Does either of you want to go?
I can try.
Okay.
So, great question. We think that at least qualitatively there's a lot of similarities in the sense that when you define some complicated crease pattern and you think about how to fold it, there's a lot of metastable states that you could get trapped in. And so the pathway that you take and how do you design that crease pattern such that in a self-folding system, it ends up where you want it to, whether that's the ground state or a metastable state, is critically important. Whether there's direct relevance to the problem of protein folding, I'm not sure, although Chris says no. A definitive no right here.
Actually, one way to look at origami is when we do origami, we're doing two-dimensional origami. We're folding a two-dimensional sheet. Protein folding is 1D origami because you can really model the protein chain as a one-dimensional linkage of sorts. And there has been a lot of work on how do you fold one-dimensional paper or a linkage. One person who's done a lot of work with that is a guy named Eric Demain at MIT. And so, but I also know there are other problems with protein folding because proteins are just such crazy things. So I don't know how much the math really applies in practice. But that's certainly a great area of interest, and people have studied one-dimensional folding for exactly that reason. Yeah. Just.
That made another question come to mind. In terms of self-folding, has anybody played with developing biological mechanisms which will make the fold happen? Like some little animal which contracts or opens is the mechanism for opening or folding a self-origami piece?
So I have a couple of things to say about that. This is a current area of interest for a lot of people. They're really into biology and places where biology and where you can actually say something quantitative. So first of all, there are leaves that actually obtain their shapes. Essentially, the hypothesis is through some kind of folding. So remember, there's a work from, I can't remember where it came from right now, but there's a work that a lot of the oak leaf shapes get their, essentially the characteristic shape, essentially because they start out their life as being folded, and then they're not actually cut, but there are constraints on how they can grow, and then when they unfold, they just naturally have this particular shape. So that would be kirigami, I guess, because you actually cut the paper, but there's models of that. There's also things like the Venus flytrap. So the Venus flytrap works essentially through a principle similar to the snapping cone that we showed you. So the idea is that you can, it's actually the opposite of that. You can trap, the way it works is that basically has a sheet somewhere in there, a two-dimensional structure that gets trapped in a higher energy state that it wants to be. And then when it gets triggered, it will very rapidly pop into the lower energy state. And that's kind of how it actually closes fast enough to catch a fly. Or a frog, believe it or not. So you have something else there?
So in terms of the more synthetic materials and synthetic biology, it's not quite synthetic biology, but biomaterial avenue, people have certainly made like muscle cell-based actuating structures, so you can look up a jellyfish that will actually sort of move like a jellyfish that's powered by muscle cells. I haven't seen yet, although I would guess it's just a matter of time, somebody doing that with origami fold patterns. It might be us. Yeah.
In the same line, what's the stimulus for unfolding, self-unfolding of those microscopic?
So the ones we made are based on temperature changes. We happen to pick a particular hydrogel that's very temperature sensitive, but you could easily do this with any number of different stimuli. So we're working with light, pH, salt concentration of a particular biomarker could be feasible. We haven't tried that yet.
So like that reminded me of another application, that question that we've talked about and other people have talked about too, is what if you could make an origami capsule, so like basically something like with this polymer gel that folds into a shape and contains some drug, but then doesn't unfold until it reaches the right pH level near like a cancer tumor or something like that. Then you could have, direct drugs applied, like, high level toxicity drugs applied to a tumor cell site specifically, and hopefully not damaging anything else. So if we could control that level of actuation, that could be one application of these kind of things.
Go for it. Ask your question.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, and back, yeah?
So, is there like some kind of rule about what an origami has to have? Like, it has to have three sides, but can it, like, the origami, if I just take a piece of paper and I go like this?
Right. So the question is, are there rules in origami as far as having to have creases or whatever in terms of origami as an art? And like many art forms, rules are made to be broken. And there are some people who call themselves origami purists, and they only want to fold from square pieces of paper. And they would not consider just bending it to really be origami. But at the other extreme, there are people who do really complicated origami models by paper crumpling. All they do is crumple the paper and make really realistic mushrooms, trees, other things that look very natural, And so I personally think that I don't like ripping the paper. That's my rule. I don't want to rip the paper. But any other kind of folding is great. And if you want to fold from a hexagon or a square, that's great. And if you don't actually fold, you just bend the paper, but it still makes an interesting structure, great. I just don't want to rip the paper, because then that is kind of cheating the game, I think. Yeah?
I was thinking like butterfly wings and other insect wings that start out folded and then have, a plumbing system that gets inflated. Is that something that you guys have been a little different than your...
Thought about it. We haven't thought about that particular example, but I think that's another example where folding and nature collide, if you will. There's actually a lot of examples of this kind of thing, and so far, I think people have only really just kind of cataloged, oh, that looks like folding, that looks like folding, and maybe we understand that little bit that looks like folding too, but there isn't any general, systematic way of thinking about it yet.
Last question?
Can you guys do full look at mountains of valleys? Can you actually like swap folds or inside
No, as the octet truss kind of shows, with the polymer gel, we can fold anything that, as long as all the creases are kind of going at the same time. So I believe, and in fact, the Randlitz bird that we showed is very close, very similar to, like, say, doing a whole bird base, which means doing a petal fold. So, yeah, the only thing we can't do is if you have to do something in sequence, we don't have a good way of doing that yet, but that's something we're working on. So if you wanted to do, you know, a squash fold and then another squash fold, or a squash fold and then a petal fold, then, yeah. These are origami terms if you don't know what those means, but it's a very good question, like that.
All right, let's thank these guys again.